Around 1 year ago today, I took the very first test drive in my 300zx. So I figured I'd make a recap video about my experience with this car through the past year, as well as how much it costs to build. I know a lot of you guys are curious how much money goes into these projects, but for me, it's how much time you put into it. But I'll tell you guys anyways. And if we have time for it, the 300zx quirks. Today is also the longest day of the year and go skate day, so hopefully we'll have a chance to go skate later. So for starters, when I bought this car, it was a shell. It didn't have an engine, didn't have a trans, and it had tan interior. Throughout the past year and a half, I've collected parts by going to junkyards and finding them myself, and also some friends that have helped me along the way. I've already done 3 drift events with my 300zx and put over 17,000 miles on it in 1 year. Yeah, I drive the heck out of this thing. It is my daily driver as well. And for those of you who are new to the channel, this is not your average 300zx. I actually put a KA24DE into here with S13 front suspension. But we'll get into all that in a bit. Let's start off with the cost of the build. About a year and a half ago, I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace late at night, like I'm sure most of you guys do, and I came across a 300zx part out, and it was this exact car. I messaged the guy and I was like, hey, would you be willing to sell the whole car? And he was like, well, maybe. Come check it out first, because there's not much left of it. Plus the interior was tan and stained. It was gross. It was missing this quarter glass, both windows for the doors. The windshield was cracked. Like I said, he was trying to part the car out and just make money off of it. He actually got this shell in a trade for, I don't know, I think he traded a bike or something. And the only reason he accepted this car in the trade is because he was planning to swap it. But he ended up just parting it out to try and make his money back. Even the lights and all the fog lights, turn signals, all of that was missing. Even the taillights were cracked, so he was getting ready to scrap the car. To make it easier for him, I offered to buy it from him. And surprisingly, he actually had a manual trans laying around that came with this car in the trade. He was looking to get around 800-ish, I think, for the shell, but we ended up making a deal for 500 for the shell and 850 with the transmission. I really needed to find a drivetrain for this car, and I did not want to put a VG in it. So I told myself the first engine or drivetrain I found, I'd put in it. And while I was going on my junkyard adventures, I came across a minty 240. Well, it wasn't really mint, it was pretty rusty, but it had a KA in there, and the odometer only had around 75,000 miles on it, maybe 80-ish, I don't know. It was pretty low miles for a KA car, so I pulled that out of the junkyard and it was around 550 for that. And then I went to another junkyard and I found a 300zx. It was also manual, so I grabbed the transmission out of that because it never hurts to have backup transmissions. And that junkyard Z had black interior, so I grabbed as much of that as I possibly could, although some of it was trashed, so I couldn't take all of it. So the Z parts set me back around 500 bucks from the junkyard. We're looking at about $1,900 just for the engine, transmission, and shell. Luckily, my brother has some Z connections, so he was able to find me some glass, headlights, and lighting. And luckily that only set me back an additional $100 or so. So at this point I had all the main components, but I needed to find all the little things in between. And we all know the little things are what really add up. So we need to find a clutch, an adapter plate to match the KA to the Z transmission because those don't bolt together, Nismo trans mount, KA ignition coil, igniter, wires, plugs, spark plugs, you name it. Fuel filter, fuel lines, coolant hoses, drive belts. Surprisingly, all those little parts added up to around $2,000-ish. So it took a total of around $4 grand to get it from a bare-ish chassis to a running and driving car. Now, through the year that I've been driving it, I spent a little bit more than $4 grand to get to look like this. So my build goal for this car was to be a daily driver, street car / drift car. I wanted something that can do all three, just like my 240 was for me. And I was not a fan of how the 300zx suspension was set up in the front. There's a few extra control arms on the 300zx front suspension compared to an S13, and I just wanted to simplify all of it so it can drive exactly like my S13 did, because my S13 drove flawlessly. So just to simplify my Z, I decided to convert it to utilize S13 front suspension, which would mean I would need S13 front knuckles, front coilovers, control arms, 5-lug conversion hubs because S13s are all 4-lug. And while I was in there, I was going to replace the rack bushings, and I also needed to convert the inner and outer tie rod ends. So all the front suspension stuff plus the rear coilovers came out to around $2,200, and luckily Smokes was able to cut these top hat plates for me. Then I also wanted to replace the brake pads and rotors as well as the calipers because the 96 calipers were steel, iron, and these are aluminum, so they're much lighter. That set me back around $350 to $400 for all the front brake stuff. A great perk with this 300zx being a 96 model, that means it's the last model the Z was ever sold in America, which means it comes with a key fob option. Now, my car didn't come with this key fob, but it did come with the key fob control module, so I just bought this key fob for around $60 on eBay, and to my surprise, it works. So cool. After lowering the car and making it look how I liked, I wanted to add some power. So I decided to put a Link ECU and a wiring specialties harness. I converted the engine management system to use an intake air temp sensor as well as a map sensor, So there's no longer a need for a MAF sensor, which we all know a MAF sensor is not really ideal for performance. Those pieces alone set me back around 3 grand. That's probably the most expensive piece that I put on this car so far. Computers are not cheap, especially quality ones. No, yeah, I definitely could have put something cheaper on there, but I wanted to put something I could trust. I want it to be reliable and fast, not cheap and fast. You know what I mean? Because then it's not reliable. And the driver experience is very important with the car. So I needed to upgrade the shifter because the old one was so sloppy, had so much throw. Plus the shift bracket bushing broke, which apparently is pretty common with these cars. So I replaced it with a solid one. And while I did that, I put a short throw shifter on there. And this one's great. Shifter plate and shifter came out to around $300. The shift knob Omar gave me. So thank you, Omar. I put on this wood grain wheel a while ago. I think it was around 60 bucks. It wasn't that expensive, but it is from Japan. Even the hub is too. It's cool. And any of the black interior that I was not able to pick up from the junkyard, Caden hooked it up or Peyton hooked it up. So shout out to you guys, thank you. Even though I spent a decent chunk to put an ECU and a harness on the car, that still wasn't enough to make it work with the KA. So we needed a few extra parts. We converted the ignition system to utilize K20 coils instead of the outdated distributor. And those coil packs ran around $200. Then I picked up a radium fuel rail with an adjustable fuel pressure regulator. There were a few radium accessories I needed to purchase to make this rail work. All the radium stuff set me back around $500. Then we need to put injectors into this rail on top of that. So I went with Injector Dynamics ID 1050s. Those set me back around $580. Since we converted K20 coils, we needed something to hold them down. So I bought a coil pack bracket and I also bought a distributor cover from the same company. Those 2 items alone set me back around $480. This catback aftermarket exhaust cost me around $500 or so. We can't forget the maintenance costs as well as random hoses, fuel filters, welding supplies, you name it. That probably cost me an additional $500 or so. I forgot about the Z32 coil radiator. I actually traded a guy an S13 diff for it, so that didn't cost me anything really. Not including the initial $4,000 it took me to get this car running and driving, I spent about $10,000 on this thing in the past year. And that does not include wheels and tires. And that also does not include the Bomex body kit. As the car sits right now, not including the wheels and tires and body kit, it cost me around $14,000. So that may seem like a lot, but again, it wasn't all at once. And it was definitely worth it. This car has very easily and very quickly become my favorite car that I'm building. I'm really looking forward to where this build's gonna go. Is 14,000 more or less than what you guys were thinking? Let me know down below. Now, when I got this shell, it had about 136,000 miles on it. After a whole year of driving, it's at about 153,000, which means I put around 17,000 miles on it in a year. I'm curious how many miles you guys put on your cars in a year. Throughout those 17,000 miles, I logged each fill up. That way I can calculate the miles per gallon it was getting. And to my surprise, it averaged around 25 miles per gallon, highest being 28 and the lowest being 14 miles per gallon. And this is including drift events. And funny enough, when I got that 14 mile per gallon average, that was during winter when I would just start it and let it idle. So basically it was getting no mileage. And then after I put the Link ECU on, it got around 20 miles to the gallon. So overall, throughout the whole year, the average was around 23 miles to the gallon. I feel like that's a little bit higher than it would have been if it had a stock VG30 in there. The KA is a lot lighter and has 2 less cylinders, so I'm sure that definitely helped a little bit. And we are here at the gas station, not to fill up my Z, but actually to begin working on the next Z. If you guys saw the last video, you guys know what's going on. If not, the next video will show it. All right, now I'll tell you guys some of the quirks I found with owning this 300ZX. Now, what makes the 300ZX unique, other than its very sleek body? The Z32 came in a few different layouts. This one in particular is a 2+2 T-top model. You can get it in a convertible, slick top, or T-top. And the T-tops are pretty cool. There's just a little handle you slide up, a tab, and it comes off really easy. And then you just fit it back in that channel. Super cool. But there's still more variants than just those 3. There's a 2+2 versus 2+0. And when people refer to that, they're referring to the seating. 2+0 means 2 seats in the front, 0 seats in the back. 2+2 is obviously 2 seats in the front and 2 in the back. So we have the 2+2 model. And the best way that you can tell the difference between the two is the gas cap will be behind the wheel on the 2+2. 2+0 has the gas cap right here. Speaking of gas cap, this fuel tank takes 18 gallons for a 2-door. I think that's pretty crazy, considering the S13 and the Integra take around 12 or 13 gallons. Now the 2+2 and the 2+0 are very different chassis indeed. The only thing those 2 chassis really share between each other is the firewall forward. So Even the doors are different, T-tops are different, the trunk is different, quarter glass. The whole length of the 2+2 is significantly longer. The exhaust routing is different. The angles are different, the gas tank's in a different position. It's almost like they completely redesigned the chassis just to utilize 2 back seats. There's even more variants than that. There's twin turbo versus non-turbo. This is the non-turbo variant. Body-wise, they can look the same, but the main difference is gonna be the twin turbo will have a different style wing. This one doesn't even come with a wing. And the front bumper on the twin turbo has vents below the fog light. This is actually a twin turbo front bumper. The only real difference is the NA has no vents there. Everything else looks the exact same. All the lighting looks the same. And with the twin turbo variant, the drivetrain is almost completely different. Now, yes, the twin turbo has turbos, the NA doesn't, but the subframes are different, the diffs are different, the transmission is different, the drive shaft is different, the brakes are different. There are quite a few differences between every single spec of the car. So it's important to make sure you know exactly what you're looking for. As for the taillights, I'll start right off the bat with the third brake light. It is very hard to find a third brake light that's not cracked. I actually bought this one brand new and it came broken in box. That's pretty common, unfortunately. I do have another one that's uncracked, but I want to wait to put it on until after I paint the car, because basically once you put these on, you don't want to take it back off since it's so fragile. As for the lower section of the taillights, 1, 2, and 3 panels, we'll call them, have 2 different options. There's a late spec JDM model that has basically the turn signal is clear, this is still red, and then they changed the 300zx to be red instead of this silver look. That's really the only differences that I know of with the taillights. As for the headlights, there are a few different options here as well. These are US spec headlights. You can tell because it has these 3 nipples on them. JDM spec is flush. And then I'm pretty sure there's a certain model or trim that has chrome inserts inside the housing. I've never seen them in person, but I've seen people post on forums and whatnot. I don't actually know if that's an OEM spec, but I've seen it done before. And another fun fact, these headlights were utilized on the Lamborghini Diablo. It even has the Nissan logo right here. And from the factory, from Lamborghini, they put this carbon fiber vinyl strip along the top that covers the Nissan logo. But they are indeed the same exact headlight. As for the brakes, there's 3 different options for the calipers that I'm aware of, and 2 different options for the rotors. And all of it depends on what year and spec the car is. There's 2 aluminum calipers and 1 cast iron caliper. What we have here are the aluminum calipers. And because this 300zx is a 96 spec, technically these should be iron, but I wanted to switch those out for aluminums because they're much lighter. As for the rear brakes, these are all the same between every single model year and trim. So that's nice and easy. You don't need to get confused with this. But interestingly enough, when you pull the handbrake, you're actually pulling a drum inside of this rotor. So this portion of the rotor is actually a drum. There's not too much factory 300zx left in the engine bay, of course, but I will say it does still have the factory ABS. Now, you cannot see it anywhere in the engine bay, and that's because it is in the factory location still, in the trunk. That's right, Nissan decided to run a whole bunch of brake lines underneath the car and in and out of each wheel well, and put the ABS module and pump right here. It's under this plastic cover. As for the interior, there were actually a few different color options for the interior. We have the classic black, as you can see, although most of it's black. Some of it's still blue and tan, actually. There's black, blue, tan, white, and red. I've never seen a white one in person, and I've never seen a red one in person. But the blue looks pretty sick, and the black obviously is a classic. Can't go wrong, and we all know tan is never an option. The early Model Zs had the seatbelts on the doors. Now, yeah, this is a late Model Z. I just converted my doors to utilize the seatbelts here because my Z came with tan interior and I quickly got rid of that. So I actually have blue B-pillars right now. Still looking for a matching set of all black. The climate controls have 3 options that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if there's more or not. There's one with just the set temp, there's one with set and ambient, and then there's one that's manual. There's also 2 different dashboards, airbag style and non-airbag. I'm pretty sure all the 95 and 96Zs came with the airbag option. So the entire dash is a different shape. The dash bar under the dash is a different shape. It's also really common for these clocks to not work, and surprise, surprise, mine does not work. And a pretty neat feature that I wish my other cars had is when you close the dome light doesn't just instantly turn off. It has a slight delay. So you can see it's still on and it's fading down. And there we go, faded out. It's a nice touch, that way you have enough time to at least put your key in the ignition cylinder before the light turns off. Oh, there's also multiple options for the mirrors, heated and non-heated. I'm not sure what this is for. I also just recently found out that the early Model Zs have a screen here for like washer fluid or something, I don't know. Mine doesn't have it, so I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. I'm also not sure if this is supposed to be a screen too. I don't know, pretty neat cars. Overall, I love the Z. I would highly recommend a Z32 chassis to anyone looking to build a car in this day and age. You can find them pretty cheap still, and I'd say a Z32 shell would be significantly cheaper than an S chassis these days, which is always the most common chassis for getting into drifting. But I'm actually looking to add some power to the Z here really soon. This is a quick little sneak peek for you guys for something that's coming up. Let's go meet up with Mr. CJ again. We've made it to the skate park, luckily. CJ is setting up the most insane camera setup here just for a couple skate clips.
Tempting to.
What do you call this, a gimbal? Is this a gimbal?
Gimbal, yeah.
I've never used one of these before, but they do work wonders. I don't know how it just automatically stabilizes like that.
Exactly.
What are you thinking?
A Smith? Front feeble?
It looks like a Smith. This would technically be a Smith.
I think maybe you should just go.
Want me to go in front of you?
Yeah.
Alright.
Oh, wait. That was clean. God.
Thank you so much for sticking around. Don't forget to drop a like if you haven't already, subscribe to see more. I will see you all in the next one. Let's see if we can get Jeff's black 300ZX started. Peace.